Welcome, restless souls, to NoSleep Nightmares Reddit. I'm WallE, your lantern in the dark, and tonight we're stepping into a world where the trees whisper secrets, the shadows play deadly games, and every sound could be your last. What lurks in these woods? A trucker's nightmare, a camper's terror, a game that never ends. Each tale twists deeper into the unknown, daring you to look closer and fear what you find. Will you make it to the end, or will the dark claim you first? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Join the sleepless at NoSleep Nightmares Reddit, because these stories don't just haunt the screen, they follow you. Let's dive in, if you dare. Master wasn't your average trucker. At 42, he'd seen enough of America's highways to write a book. Dusty diners, endless asphalt, and the kind of solitude that either breaks a man or makes him stronger. He was the latter, broad-shouldered, grizzled, with a voice like gravel and a laugh that could shake the cab. His rig, a beat-up Peterbilt he called Betsy, was his home more than any house ever had been. Hauling freight from coast to coast, Master lived for the hum of the engine and the freedom of the open road. But freedom, as he'd soon learn, comes with a price. It was late March 18, 2025 to be exact, when Master took a job that'd change everything. The gig was simple: pick up a load of industrial parts in Omaha and deliver them to a warehouse in Reno by week's end. The route was a straight shot through Nebraska, Wyoming, and into Nevada, mostly along I-80. But Master, being Master, liked to shave time where he could. That's when he decided to detour onto Route 13, a narrow, forgotten stretch of blacktop snaking through the black pine forest, a dense woodland straddling the Wyoming-Nevada line. Locals called it the shortcut no one takes. Master figured they were just superstitious. He'd driven worse. The sun was dipping below the horizon as Betsy rumbled onto Route 13, her headlights slicing through the thickening dusk. The forest loomed on either side, towering pines with gnarled branches that clawed at the sky, their shadows stretching across the road like skeletal fingers. Master cracked the window, letting the cool air whistle in, and tuned the radio to a staticky country station. Johnny Cash's baritone crooned about a ring of fire, a fitting soundtrack for the amber glow fading behind him. He'd been driving for hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional deer darting across the road. His stomach growled, and he decided it was time to pull over. About 10 miles into the forest, he spotted a small clearing off the shoulder, a patch of gravel just wide enough for Betsy. Perfect. He parked, killed the engine, and climbed out to stretch his legs. The silence hit him like a wall. No birds, no crickets, just the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. It was eerie, sure, but Master shrugged it off. He'd slept in creepier spots. Back in the cab, he heated up a can of chili on his portable stove, the smell filling the small space. He was halfway through his meal, spoon poised midair, when it happened. Thump! A dull, heavy sound against the side of the truck, right near the passenger door. Master froze, chili dripping onto his lap. He set the spoon down slowly, ears straining. The forest was still, no wind, no movement, just that single, deliberate thump. "Hello," he called, voice rough but steady. No answer. He grabbed his flashlight, a hefty mag light that doubled as a club, and leaned toward the window. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted branches and undergrowth. Nothing. No eyes glinting back, no figure lurking, just trees. "Probably a damn branch," he muttered, settling back into his seat. But the chili didn't taste as good anymore. His gut twisted, that old trucker instinct kicking in. the one that had saved him from icy patches and drowsy nights. Something wasn't right. Then it came again. Thump, thump. 2 sharp strikes, this time louder, closer to the rear of the cab. Master's head snapped around, heart thudding against his ribs. "Who's out there?" he barked, louder now, grabbing the maglite again. He swung open the driver's door and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The air was colder than it should have been, heavy with the scent of pine and something else. Something metallic, like rust or blood. He circled Betsy, flashlight sweeping the perimeter. The forest stared back, impenetrable and silent. No broken branches, no tracks, nothing to explain the noise. But the hairs on his neck stood up, and his breath fogged in tight, quick bursts. "Ain't scared of no raccoon," he growled, mostly to convince himself. Still, he climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. The thought of driving off crossed his mind. Get the hell out of this clearing and back to the highway. But exhaustion weighed him down, and pride kept him rooted. He wasn't about to let a couple of weird noises chase him off. He finished his meal in silence, eyes darting to the windows every few seconds. The forest pressed in, its darkness seeping through the glass. Master lay back on his bunk, pulling a thin blanket over himself, and tried to sleep. But every rustle, every creak of Betsy settling, jolted him awake. And then, just as his eyelids grew heavy, he heard it. A low, guttural whisper, barely audible over the hum of his own breathing. "Stay." Master shot upright, blanket tangling around his legs. His hand fumbled for the maglite, knocking over an empty coffee mug in the process. The cab was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of his dashboard clock. 2:13 a.m. He held his breath, listening. The whisper came again, soft and insidious, like wind slithering through cracks. "Stay with us." It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the cab, close, intimate, as if someone were leaning over his shoulder. Master swung the flashlight around, beam slashing through the shadows. The passenger seat was empty. The tiny storage nook behind him held only his duffel bag and a stack of road maps. No one. Nothing. His pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the silence. "Who's there?" he demanded, voice cracking despite his best efforts. "I ain't playing games." The only response was a faint chuckle, a wet, rattling sound that made his skin crawl. He flicked on the cab's overhead light, bathing the space in harsh yellow. Still nothing, but the air felt thicker now, oppressive, like it was pressing against his chest. Master wasn't a superstitious man. He'd laughed off ghost stories at truck stops, tales of hitchhikers who vanished mid-ride or headlights that followed you through the fog. But this was different. This wasn't a story. This was real, and it was happening to him. He grabbed his keys, hands trembling, and jammed them into the ignition. Betsy sputtered to life, her engine roaring in defiance of the night. "Screw this," he muttered, shifting into gear. The headlights flared, illuminating the clearing, and that's when he saw it. Just beyond the gravel, at the edge of the trees, a figure stood, tall, thin, draped in tattered cloth that fluttered despite the still air. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes, God, its eyes, glowed like twin embers in the dark. Master floored the gas, tires spitting gravel as Betsy lurched forward. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched as he peeled back onto Route 13. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. He didn't need to. He could feel it watching him, those burning eyes boring into the back of his skull. The road stretched ahead, a black ribbon winding through the forest. Master kept his foot on the pedal, pushing Betsy past her limits. The whispers faded, replaced by the growl of the engine and the rush of blood in his ears. He drove for miles, the trees blurring into a wall of shadow, until the forest finally thinned and the first signs of civilization appeared. A rusted gas station sign flickering in the distance, he pulled into the lot, hands still clenched around the wheel, and killed the engine. The station was closed, its windows dark, but the sodium glow of a single street lamp felt like salvation. Master sat there, breathing hard, trying to piece together what had happened. A prank? A hallucination from too many sleepless nights? He didn't know, and part of him didn't want to. But as he reached for his thermos, something caught his eye. Scratched into the passenger side door, deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before, were 2 words: "Come back." Master didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the gas station lot until dawn, sipping lukewarm coffee and replaying the encounter in his mind. The figure, the whispers, the scratches, they didn't make sense, but they clung to him like damp rot when the sun finally rose, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. He drove Betsy to a nearby diner. The normalcy of clinking plates and tired waitresses grounded him, but only just. He asked around, casual-like, about Route 13. The locals didn't say much. An old-timer in a faded flannel shirt muttered something about bad land and folks who don't come back. A waitress, her name tag reading Doris, overheard and chimed in. "Ain't no one uses that road less they're desperate," she said, pouring him a refill. "They say it's cursed, old Indian burial ground or some such. Truckers go missing there every few years. You're lucky you made it out." Master forced a laugh, brushing it off as small-town nonsense. But the scratches on Betsy's door weren't nonsense. They were real, and they were a message. He finished his coffee, paid the bill, and hit the road again, determined to put Route 13 behind him. The delivery in Reno went off without a hitch, and for a few days, life returned to normal. Long hauls, greasy food, and the hum of the highway. But the forest wasn't done with him. It started small. A faint tapping on Betsy's frame when he parked at night, always just out of sight. Shadows flickering in his peripheral vision, gone when he turned to look. And the dreams, vivid, suffocating dreams of endless pines, of hands clawing up from the earth, of that figure with its ember eyes calling his name. "Master, stay with us." He'd wake in a cold sweat, the cab reeking of pine and that strange metallic tang. He tried to ignore it, kept driving, kept moving. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it wasn't just at night. One afternoon, hauling lumber through Idaho, he heard it in broad daylight. Thump, 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 like something pounding on the trailer. He pulled over, checked every inch of Betsy. Nothing. Not a loose strap. Not a rock in the wheel well. Just those damn scratches glaring back at him. That's when he noticed the pattern. The tapping only happened when he was alone, far from cities, near woods or fields. It was following him. No, it was hunting him. Master wasn't a man to run from a fight, but this wasn't a fight he could win with fists or a tire iron. He needed answers. Against every shred of common sense, Master decided to go back. Not to Route 13, not yet, but to the Black Pine Forest itself. He'd heard whispers at truck stops about a ranger station on the forest's edge, abandoned since the 90s after a string of unexplained disappearances. If anyone knew what was haunting him, it'd be there, buried in old logs or forgotten files. He parked Betsy a mile out, grabbing his flashlight, a hunting knife, and a recorder. Something to document whatever he found. The forest swallowed him, As he stepped past the tree line, the air growing colder with every step. The pines towered overhead, their branches knitting together to block out the sky. It was mid-afternoon, but it felt like midnight. The ranger station was a crumbling husk. Rotted wood, shattered windows, and a door hanging off its hinges. Inside dust coated everything. A desk, a rusted coffee pot, a corkboard with faded missing persons flyers. Master rifled through drawers, finding nothing but mouldy papers and a few chewed pencils. Then, in a filing cabinet, he struck gold. A leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. The entries were dated from 1987 to 1992, written by a ranger named Elias Crow. Most were mundane, weather reports, wildlife sightings, but the last few pages turned his blood cold. October 12th, 1991. Heard it again last night. Low voices, like people talking just out of earshot. Checked the perimeter, nothing. Been happening for weeks now. The men are spooked. Tom swears he saw someone watching us from the trees, but there were no tracks. October 15, 1991. Found scratches on the station door this morning. Deep, like claw marks, but too precise for an animal. Radio's been static all day. Something's out there, and it's getting closer. October 20th, 1991. Tom's gone. Went out to check a noise and didn't come back. Searched till dawn, no sign of him. Just his hat, torn and bloody, 50 yards from the station. The voices are louder now, calling my name. I'm not imagining this. The final entry was scrawled, ink smeared as if written in a hurry. October 23rd, 1991. They're in the walls. I hear them scratching, whispering. Stay with us, they say. I can't leave. They won't let me. If anyone finds this, don't come looking. Burn this place down and run. Master closed the journal, his mouth dry. The parallels were too close, too exact. He pocketed the book and turned to leave, but the air shifted. A low hum filled the station, vibrating through the floorboards. The whispers returned, overlapping, insistent. Stay, stay, stay. Shadows stretched across the walls, though no light source could have cast them. And then, a single, resounding thump shook the building. He bolted, crashing through the door and sprinting back to Betsy. The forest came alive around him, branches snapping, footsteps pounding just behind. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Betsy's engine roared as he floored it, tires screeching as he tore out of the forest's grasp. Master thought he'd escaped. He was wrong. The tapping followed him everywhere now, every stop, every night. The figure appeared too, always at a distance, in the trees off I-90, in the fog along Route 66, its ember eyes unblinking. The whispers invaded his dreams, his waking hours, until he couldn't tell reality from nightmare. His hands shook on the wheel, his eyes burned from sleeplessness. Betsy's cab became a prison, the road a noose tightening around his neck. Desperate, he tracked down an old Navajo trucker named Joe at a dive bar in Flagstaff. Joe listened to Master's story, face grim, and lit a cigarette. "You've been marked," he said, exhaling smoke. "Black pine ain't just a forest, it's a grave. Spirits there don't rest. They take what's theirs, truckers, wanderers, anyone who lingers too long. You heard 'em, saw 'em. They've got your scent now. How do I stop it?" Master asked, voice hoarse. Joe leaned closer, eyes dark. "You don't. You bargain. Go back to Route 13. Offer something. Blood. A promise. Something personal. They'll take it, or they'll take you." Master didn't want to believe it, but he had no choice. The next night, he drove back to that cursed clearing, armed with a knife and a bottle of whiskey. The forest was waiting, silent, expectant. He stepped out, heart pounding, and poured the whiskey onto the ground. "Take it," he said, voice trembling. "Take this and leave me be." Nothing happened. The air grew colder, the whispers rising into a chorus. "More," they hissed. Master gritted his teeth, drew the knife across his palm, and let the blood drip into the dirt. "This enough," he shouted. "Take it and go." The ground trembled. The figure emerged from the trees, closer now, its face a hollow mask, its hands skeletal and claw-like. It reached for him and Master stumbled back, blood dripping faster. "Please," he whispered, "let me go." The figure stopped, tilting its head. The whispers ceased. And then, with a sound like tearing fabric, it vanished. The forest fell still. Master drove away, hand bandaged, head spinning. The tapping stopped. The figure didn't return. But every time he passed the forest, every time he heard a rustle in the dark, he felt it. Those ember eyes, watching, waiting, reminding him of the pact he'd made. Master still drives, though he avoids Route 13 like the plague. Betsy's scratches remain, a permanent scar. He doesn't talk about that night, not to other truckers, not to anyone, but sometimes, late at night, when the road is empty and the pines close in, he swears he hears it, a faint, fleeting whisper. "Come back." That was Master's run-in with the shadows of Route 13, a road that doesn't let go once it's got your number. But the night's not done with us yet. Out in the desert beyond Vegas, Ian thought he'd found solitude in his van, until something tapped on his door, something that didn't belong to this world. Buckle up, nightmares. The sands have their own whispers, and they're calling next. Ian wasn't your typical YouTuber. At 29, he'd carved out a niche on the internet as a stealth camper, part survivalist, part urban ghost. Filming his life in a beat-up van, he'd converted into a rolling home. With shaggy brown hair, a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, and a voice that cracked with nervous excitement, he'd charmed a small but loyal audience with his minimalist adventures. His channel, Hidden Trails, was all about finding the quiet spots, the forgotten corners where the world couldn't touch you. And in a city like Las Vegas, where neon and noise ruled, that meant heading out past the Strip into the raw, unyielding desert. It was March 18, 2025, when Ian decided to push his luck. He'd spent the day editing a video in a McDonald's parking lot. Free Wi-Fi and cheap coffee were his lifelines. Before pointing his van toward the outskirts, the plan was simple. Find a spot off the grid, set up his gear, and film a night of solitude for his subscribers. Vegas was a sprawl of excess, but beyond its glow lay miles of sand and scrub, dotted with dry washes and skeletal Joshua trees. Ian loved it out there. The vastness, the silence, the way it made him feel small but free. He drove west on a cracked 2-lane road, the city's lights fading in his rear-view mirror. The desert stretched out like an endless black sea, broken only by the occasional tumbleweed skittering across his headlights. About 20 miles out, he spotted a dirt pull-off near a cluster of low dunes, a perfect hideaway. He parked the van, a grey Dodge he'd nicknamed the Shadow, and killed the engine. The silence was immediate, thick, almost tangible. No hum of traffic, no distant slot machines, just the wind, soft and restless, brushing against the dunes. Ian hopped out, stretching his legs, and set up his gear. He mounted a GoPro on a tripod outside, aimed at the van's rear doors, and rigged a small LED light inside to film his setup. A sleeping bag, a cooler, and a curtain he'd rigged to block the windows. "All right, folks," he said, voice low for the mic. We're out here tonight. Stealth mode activated. Got the dunes, the stars, and yeah, maybe a little peace. Let's see how this goes." He flashed a grin, but his eyes darted to the darkness beyond the lens. Something about the quiet felt off, too heavy, too watchful. He climbed back inside, locking the doors with a satisfying click. The van was his fortress, a bubble of safety in the wild. He ate a granola bar, scrolled through his phone, spotty signal, but enough to post a teaser, and lay back, ready to call it a night. The desert night was cool, the wind a faint murmur against the metal. He was drifting off, the GoPro still rolling, when it happened. A soft, metallic clank, like someone tugging at the rear door handle. Ian's eyes snapped open. He sat up, heart thudding, and listened. The sound came again, clank, clank, deliberate, probing. "What the hell?" he whispered, grabbing his phone to use as a flashlight. He crept to the back, peering through a gap in the curtain. The GoPro's night vision caught the edge of the dunes, but nothing else. No movement, no shadow, just sand and stillness. "Hey," he called, voice sharper than he meant. "Who's out there?" Silence. He waited, breath held, but the night gave nothing back. "Probably just the wind," he muttered, forcing a laugh for the camera. But his hands shook as he checked the locks again. He lay back down, eyes fixed on the ceiling, every creak of the van amplified in his mind. Then, a new sound, a low, guttural rasp, like air escaping a punctured tire. It wasn't the wind. It was closer, right outside the door, and it was moving. Ian bolted upright, phone slipping from his grip. The rasp grew louder, joined by a faint shuffle, sand shifting under weight. Something was out there, circling the van. He fumbled for his flashlight, a cheap LED he kept in the glove box, and flicked it on. The beam trembled as he aimed it at the curtained window. "This isn't funny," he shouted, voice cracking. "I'm filming this, so back off." The shuffling stopped. For a moment, he thought it was over. Some drunk stumbling back to Vegas, maybe a coyote sniffing around. But then, a shadow fell across the curtain, tall, humanoid, swaying slightly as if off balance. Ian's breath caught. He yanked the curtain aside, flashlight piercing the night. There it was. A figure stood just beyond the rear doors, maybe 10 feet away. It was man-shaped but wrong. Too thin, too hunched, its arms dangling like broken branches, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and its face. God, its face was a smear of shadow, featureless except for 2 dull reflective glints where eyes should have been. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, swaying in the windless dark. Ian stumbled back, slamming into the cooler. "Holy!" he gasped, dropping the flashlight. It rolled, casting wild arcs of light across the van. The figure took a step closer, its feet dragging through the sand with that awful rasp. Clank. It poured at the door again, harder this time, the metal groaning under the pressure. "Get away!" Ian screamed, lunging for the driver's seat. He jammed the key into the ignition, hands slick with sweat. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. He hit the gas, the van lurching forward, tires spinning in the loose dirt. In the side mirror, he caught a glimpse of the figure, still standing, still watching, its head cocked as if curious. He didn't stop until he hit pavement, the desert blurring past in a haze of panic. The Vegas skyline loomed ahead, a beacon of sanity. He pulled into a gas station lot, heart hammering, and checked the locks again. The GoPro was still rolling. He'd forgotten to turn it off. Hands shaking, he played back the footage. There it was, the shadow, the glints, the sway. Not clear enough to prove anything, but enough to make his stomach churn. "What the hell was that?" he whispered to the camera, voice raw. I'm done. I'm not sleeping out there again." He uploaded the clip unedited, too rattled to care about polish. His subscribers ate it up. Some called it a prank. Others swore it was real. Ian didn't know what to believe. He just knew he'd never felt so small, so exposed. But the desert wasn't finished with him. For a week, Ian stayed in the city. He parked near busy lots, slept with the radio on, and avoided the dark. The video blew up, 50,000 views, comments flooding with theories. Zombie, drunk guy, skinwalker. He laughed it off in a follow-up, blaming exhaustion and bad lighting. But the laughter was hollow. At night, he heard it. The rasp, faint but persistent, like an echo in his skull. The glinting eyes haunted his dreams, unblinking, waiting. He tried to move on. Took a gig filming a stealth camp near Lake Mead, sticking to well-lit spots. But the desert followed him. One night, parked by the water, he woke to a tapping on the van side. Tap, 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 slow and deliberate. He grabbed his flashlight, checked outside. Nothing, just sand and stars. The next morning, he found scratches on the door. Thin, jagged lines that hadn't been there before. Ian stopped filming, stopped camping. He rented a cheap motel room off the strip, figuring walls and locks would keep it out. They didn't. The tapping came at 3 a.m. sharp against the window. He tore the curtains open. Nothing but the parking lot, bathed in flickering neon. Yet the sound persisted, moving to the walls, the ceiling, a relentless rhythm that drove him to the edge. Desperate, he dug into Vegas lore. Online forums mentioned the Whispering Sands, a stretch of desert west of the city, avoided by locals. Stories went back decades. Miners vanishing in the 1800s, hikers lost in the 70s, their gear found scattered miles from their last known spot. One post stuck with him, a trucker's tale from 1998, claiming he'd seen a ragged man in the dunes, its eyes like dead stars. The trucker heard whispers after, urging him to come back. He never drove that route again. Ian realized he'd parked right in the heart of those sands. Whatever he'd met wasn't human, not anymore. It was tied to that place, a remnant of something old, something hungry. And it had his scent. Ian couldn't run forever. The tapping, the whispers, they were wearing him down, unraveling his mind. He had to face it. Armed with a flashlight, a knife, and his GoPro, he drove back to that pull-off on March 25th, 2025. The dunes loomed under a moonless sky, the air thick with static. He stepped out, boots sinking into sand, and hit record. "All right," he said, voice trembling. "I'm back. Whatever you are, let's end this." The desert answered. A low hum rose from the ground, vibrating through his bones. The wind kicked up, carrying whispers, dozens, hundreds, overlapping in a chorus of despair. "Stay, join us." Ian swept the flashlight across the dunes. Shadows twisted, fleeting shapes darting just beyond the beam. Then he saw it, a dip in the sand, half hidden by scrub. A rusted metal hatch, barely visible, its edges caked with dirt. He knelt, heart pounding, and pried it open. A ladder descended into darkness, the air below stale and cold. "This is insane," he muttered, but he climbed down, GoPro strapped to his chest. The tunnel was narrow, its walls rough-hewn stone etched with symbols, spirals, eyes, jagged lines like claw marks. The whispers grew louder, guiding him deeper. After 50 feet, the passage opened into a chamber. Ian's flashlight revealed bones, human bones, piled in the corners, some cracked, some gnawed. In the center stood a slab, stained black with old blood, surrounded by more symbols. And there, carved into the wall, a word, Kweyatsi. He didn't know what it meant, but it chilled him. The hum intensified, the air pulsing with malice. Footsteps echoed behind him, slow, dragging. Ian spun, flashlight catching the figure from that night. It was closer now, its tattered rags swaying, its glinting eyes locked on him. Its mouth opened, a black, toothless maw, and rasped. You came back. Ian bolted, scrambling up the ladder as the thing lurched after him. Its claws scraped stone, inches from his legs. He burst out of the hatch, slamming it shut, and ran for the van. The ground shook, whispers rising to screams. Stay, stay. He drove off, tires spinning, the figure's silhouette fading in the mirror. Ian didn't stop until dawn, crashing at a friend's place in Henderson. He researched Kweyatsi, an old Paiute word for the devourer, a spirit that lured wanderers to their doom, feeding on their fear. The chamber was its lair, the sands its hunting ground. He'd escaped, but at a cost. The tapping never returned. The whispers faded. But every night, Ian feels it. A pull, a longing to go back. He sold the van, quit YouTube, moved inland. Yet the desert lingers in his mind, its sands whispering his name. He knows it's waiting, patient and eternal, for the day he can't resist. Ian barely escaped the grip of the whispering sands. But the dark doesn't rest. And neither do we. Deep in the woods of Hollow Ridge, Jasco thought he could play a game with the unknown, a little hide and clap to spice up the night. Oh, he found something all right, something that doesn't lose. Ready for round 3, sleepless ones. The forest is waiting. Jasco wasn't your average outdoorsman. At 34, he was a wiry bundle of restless energy, tattooed arms, a mop of black hair, and eyes that sparkled with a mix of mischief and madness. He ran a small YouTube channel, Ghostwood Chronicles, where he chased the paranormal with a camera and a grin, documenting abandoned houses, forgotten cemeteries, and, his favorite, haunted forests. His subscribers, a tight-knit crew of thrill-seekers, lived for his late-night uploads, each one a plunge into the unknown. Jasco thrived on it. The adrenaline, the mystery, the chance to stare into the void and dare it to blink first. It was March 18, 2025, when Jasco set his sights on Hollow Ridge, a sprawling woodland in northern Oregon, tucked between jagged hills and a winding river. Locals avoided it, whispering about missing hikers, strange lights, and voices that called from the trees. The forest had a reputation, one Jasco couldn't resist. He'd heard the stories. A logger vanishing in the 50s, his axe found embedded in a tree. A family lost in the 80s, their campsite untouched except for a single, bloody handprint. Perfect fodder for a video. He drove his beat-up Jeep to the forest's edge, parking near a rusted sign that read, Hollow Ridge, no trespassing. Rules are for suckers, he muttered, slinging a backpack over his shoulder. Inside a tent, a spirit box, a flashlight, and his trusty GoPro. The plan was simple. Hike in, set up camp, and spend the night poking the supernatural bear. Maybe tell a ghost story by the fire. Maybe catch something weird on camera. Either way, his fans would eat it up. The forest swallowed him as he crossed the tree line. Towering pines loomed overhead, their branches knitting a canopy that choked out the sun. The air was damp, thick with the scent of moss and decay. Jasco trudged deeper, boots sinking into soft earth, until he found a clearing, a circle of bare ground ringed by gnarled trees. "This'll do," he said, dropping his pack. He pitched his tent, a faded green dome, and built a small fire, the crackle of flames cutting through the stillness. As dusk fell, he set up the GoPro, its red light blinking. "All right, Ghostwood crew," he said, voice low and theatrical. "Welcome to Hollow Ridge. They say this place is cursed. Lost souls, weird vibes, the works. Tonight, we're gonna see what's real and what's just campfire BS. Stick with me, this could get wild." He settled by the fire, the orange glow casting long shadows. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a heavy, expectant hush. Jasco pulled out his spirit box, a gadget that scanned radio frequencies for supposed spirit voices. He flicked it on, static crackling to life. "Anyone out there?" he asked, grinning. "Come say hi. Don't be shy." The static buzzed, then spat out a garbled word. "Mother." Jasco's grin faltered. Okay, who's this mother? You got a name?" The box hissed, then rasped. "Stay." He chuckled nervously. "Stay? Nah, I'm just visiting. How about a game instead? Ever played hide and clap?" It was a spur-of-the-moment idea, a creepy twist on a childhood game inspired by a horror flick he'd seen. "Here's the deal," he said, eyes on the camera. "I'll close my eyes, give you 20 seconds to hide, then you clap to let me know where you are. Ready? 3, 2, 1. He shut his eyes, counting aloud. The forest held its breath. At 20, he opened them, flashlight in hand. "All right, clap for me." Silence. Then, from the trees to his left, a sharp, deliberate clap. Jasco spun, beams slicing through the dark. "There you are. Round 1, let's go again." He closed his eyes, counted, and waited. Clap. Closer this time, behind him. He turned, heart picking up speed. "You're fast, huh? One more round." Eyes shut, counting down. The air grew colder, heavier. At 20, he opened his eyes and froze. Clap, clap, clap. 3 sharp sounds echoing from every direction. The forest erupted, branches snapping, leaves rustling, a low hum rising from the ground. Jasco's grin vanished. "Okay, that's enough games," he stammered, grabbing the spirit box. It screeched, a voice cutting through. "Find me." Jasco stumbled back, flashlight trembling. The fire flickered, its light shrinking as shadows pressed in. "What the hell?" he whispered, swinging the beam across the clearing. The trees seemed taller, their branches curling inward like claws. The clapping stopped, but the hum grew, a deep, resonant drone that vibrated in his chest. He turned off the spirit box, hands shaking. "Just the wind," he said, forcing calm for the camera. Or some animal messing with me. No big deal." But the lie tasted sour. This wasn't wind. This was something else. Something awake. Something listening. He sat by the tent, trying to steady his breathing. The GoPro's light blinked steadily, a small comfort. "All right, folks," he said, voice tight. "Let's switch gears. How about a story? Keep things chill." He launched into a tale about a hiker lost in Hollow Ridge, found weeks later with scratches covering his body, clothes soaked in blood that wasn't his. It was a story he'd dug up online. Creepy, sure, but safe. Just words. Halfway through, a twig snapped behind him. Jasco whipped around, flashlight catching only shadows. "Probably a deer," he muttered, but his pulse raced. He kept talking, voice rising as the forest stirred. More snaps, a rustle, a faint shuffle in the undergrowth. The fire sputtered, flames dipping low despite the fresh wood. Then, a clap, sharp, wet, like hands slick with mud. It came from inside the tent. Jasco froze, words dying in his throat. "No way," he breathed, turning slowly. The tent flap hung still, but the air inside felt wrong, thick, charged. He grabbed his knife, a 6-inch blade he kept for emergencies, and edged closer. "If this is a prank, you're screwed," he called, voice cracking. He unzipped the flap, flashlight piercing the dark. Empty. Just his sleeping bag, his pack, the spirit box on the ground, still off, but humming faintly. Another clap, right beside him. He spun, blade raised, and caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow darting past the tent, too fast, too tall to be human. Jasco bolted upright, heart slamming against his ribs. "Screw this," he snapped, kicking dirt over the fire. "I'm out." He reached for the tent stakes, ready to pack up, when the ground shook, a low rolling tremor that knocked him off balance. The trees groaned, bending inward, and the whispers began. "Play, play, play." A chorus of voices, soft and jagged, rising from the earth. Jasco's flashlight flickered, the beam stuttering. He grabbed the GoPro, hands slick with sweat, and ran for the Jeep, half a mile back through the woods. Branches clawed at him, roots snagged his boots, but he didn't stop. The whispers chased him, weaving through the trees. "Find me, find me." He reached the Jeep, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared, headlights flooding the path. As he peeled out, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it. A figure in the clearing, tall and gaunt, its head tilted, hands raised as if mid-clap. Its eyes glowed, a sickly yellow, unblinking, locked on him. Jasco didn't sleep that night. He drove straight to a motel in Portland, checking the locks twice before collapsing on the bed. The GoPro footage was a mess, shaky, half-lit, but the claps were there, clear as day. He uploaded it raw, titling it Hollow Ridge Nightmare. "Something's out there," he typed in the description. "Not doing that again." His subscribers went wild. Some called it fake, others begged for more. Jasco just wanted to forget, but Hollow Ridge wouldn't let him. The next night, camped in a parking lot, he woke to a clap outside the Jeep. He checked. Nothing but asphalt and streetlights. The night after, in a friend's garage, it came again. Clap, clap from the shadows. Scratches appeared on the Jeep's hood. Deep, uneven, like fingernails dragged through paint. He dug into the forest's history, desperate for answers. Hollow Ridge wasn't just haunted, it was a wound. In 1892, a logging crew vanished there, leaving behind tools and a journal. The last entry read, "They sing in the hollow. They want us to stay." In 1927, a search party found bones, human bones, scattered in a circle, each marked with strange carvings. Locals blamed a spirit, a thing called the Clapper, a guardian of the woods, or a predator, depending who you asked. It lured with games, trapped with whispers, and never let go. Jasco realized he'd played its game. Hide and clap wasn't his idea, it was theirs. He'd invited it in, and now it was tethered to him. Jasco couldn't outrun it. The claps followed, on walls, on windows, in his dreams. The whispers grew louder, a constant drone. "Play, find me." He lost weight, stopped filming, his eyes sinking into dark hollows. On March 25th, 2025, he made a choice. He had to go back, to end it. He returned to Hollow Ridge, armed with salt, a lighter, and his GoPro. The forest was waiting, its silence a trap. He hiked to the clearing, the air thick with rot. "I'm here," he said, voice steady. "Let's finish this." The ground rumbled. Shadows bled from the trees. Dozens of figures, gaunt and eyeless, their hands clapping in unison. The Clapper emerged, tall, skeletal, its yellow eyes blazing. "Play," it rasped, voice like splintered wood. Jasco poured salt in a circle, lit a ring of fire around him. "No more games," he shouted, tossing the spirit box into the flames. It screeched, voices erupting. "Stay, find me." The figures lunged, claws raking the air, but the fire held. The clapper shrieked, a sound that split the night, and the forest convulsed, trees bending, earth cracking, then silence. The figures vanished, the clapper with them. Jasco staggered out, fire dying behind him, and drove away. The clap stopped, the whispers faded, but the forest left its mark, scratches on his soul, a lingering echo he'd never shake. Jasco quit Ghostwood Chronicles. He lives in the city now, far from trees, but sometimes, in the quiet, he hears it. A faint clap, a whispered, "Find me." Hollow Ridge waits, patient and eternal, for the next player. And there you have it, sleepless wanderers, the end of our twisted road through shadows and whispers. From Master's haunted highway, to Ian's desert nightmare, to Jasco's deadly game, these woods and wastes hold secrets that don't let go. Or do they? What's lurking beyond the next tree, the next dune? Stick around to find out. Subscribe to NoSleep Nightmares Reddit and hit that bell, because the nightmares don't stop here. They're just waking up. Share your own dark tales below. I'm always listening. Sleep tight if you can. This is Mr. Creepypasta, fading into the night.